From the outside, Emily Carter's life looked like a dream. Every morning at exactly 6:15 a.m., she tied her running shoes, slipped on her old grey hoodie, and jogged along the quiet banks of the Avon River in Bristol, England. The soft sound of water against the shore, the distant hum of early traffic, and the pink glow of sunrise were her daily therapy. Neighbors often waved as she passed. Some didn't even know her name, but everyone knew her smile. Emily was 38 years old, full of warmth, and easy to love. She worked as a marketing consultant for a small firm in the city, but what people remembered most about her was not her job, it was her heart. She volunteered at a local animal shelter on weekends. She painted in her spare time. She laughed loudly, sometimes too loudly, and never apologized for it. At home, she shared her life with 2 rescue cats and a small golden retriever named Milo, who followed her everywhere like a shadow. After her morning run, Emily always stopped at the same little coffee shop on Park Street. The barista knew her order by memory: oat milk latte, 1 sugar. She sat by the window, answering emails, texting friends, or sketching ideas in a small brown notebook she carried everywhere. To the people around her, Emily was the picture of peace. And then there was Mark Carter. Mark was 42, tall, clean-cut, and soft-spoken. He worked as a financial analyst and had recently moved from London to Bristol after marrying Emily. To the public, Mark was the definition of a devoted husband. He drove her to work when it rained. He cooked dinner most nights. He posted photos of her on social media with captions like, "My whole world," and, "Blessed beyond words." Friends often said, "You're so lucky, Emily," and she would smile and agree. Their home was modest but beautiful. A 2-story brick house in a quiet suburb near Redland, with white curtains, warm lights in the windows, and flower pots lined neatly along the front steps. Inside, it smelled of coffee, candles, and fresh laundry. The kind of house that felt safe. The kind of house no one would ever suspect. On the surface, everything was perfect. But perfection has a way of hiding cracks. Sometimes, when Emily was out with friends, Mark would call her more than once. "Just to check in," he said. When she received messages from unknown numbers, he always wanted to know who it was. If she came home later than expected, his questions were gentle, but persistent. Emily brushed it off as concern. Love, she told herself, could look like that sometimes. Yet, late at night, alone with her thoughts, Emily sometimes felt a tightness in her chest she couldn't explain. A quiet feeling that something was off. She didn't tell her friends. She didn't tell her family in Manchester. She told herself she was imagining things. After all, Mark was kind. He was patient. He was her husband. Still, the shadows were already there. They were just easy to miss in the light. If you want to uncover how a perfect life can hide terrifying secrets, make sure you subscribe to this channel right now, because what you're about to hear will change everything you think you know about trust. And so, in that quiet home in Bristol, where neighbors waved and flowers bloomed by the door, a dark story was already beginning. No one saw it coming. Not Emily's friends. Not her family. And not even Emily herself. But behind the smiles, the shadows were growing. At first, the signs were so small that Emily barely noticed them. Mark always asked where she was going, but in a soft voice. "Just checking in," he would say with a smile. "If you need a lift, let me know," he'd add. When Emily met her friends for brunch in Clifton or drinks along the harbourside, Mark would call once, then twice, sometimes 3 times. He said he simply missed her. He said the house felt empty without her. And Emily, always kind, always understanding, told herself that was what love looked like. But slowly, the questions changed. Who is Sarah, and why does she text you so much? Why didn't you answer your phone for 10 minutes? Why do you need to stay out so late? The words were calm. The tone was gentle, but the meaning underneath felt heavy. Emily still laughed it off. "You worry too much," she joked. But deep inside, she began to feel watched, even when Mark wasn't in the room. Soon, little things started disappearing from her life. A yoga class she stopped attending because Mark said it was a waste of money. Weekly coffee dates with her best friend Lucy, slowly cancelled one by one. Weekend trips she used to take without thinking, now always inconvenient. Mark never forbade anything directly. He only made it difficult. And Emily, without even realizing it, began choosing peace over conflict. Her friends noticed. Lucy once pulled her aside at a birthday dinner. Let us know in the comments as this story unfolds. By the time summer arrived in Bristol, Emily was seeing her friends less, calling her family less, and spending more and more time inside the house with Mark. A house that once felt warm, now felt quiet. Too quiet. And no one, not her friends, not her neighbors, not even Emily herself, realized just how carefully he hid the truth. The morning Emily vanished began like every other. Tuesday, September 12, 2023, dawned cool and quiet over Bristol. The sky was pale gray, the kind of morning that smelled like rain but never quite delivered it. Emily rose just after 7 a.m., slipped out of bed carefully so she wouldn't wake Mark, and pulled on her light blue jacket. Milo followed her to the kitchen, tail wagging softly. She poured a bowl of kibble for him, kissed his head, and grabbed her phone and wallet from the counter. "I'll just run to the coffee shop and be back," she said softly. Mark, half asleep on the couch where he had spent the night, lifted his head. "Take your time," he murmured. "I'll start breakfast." Those were the last words anyone ever heard Emily Carter speak. At 7:38 a.m., CCTV from a corner shop on White Ladies Road captured Emily walking past, phone in hand, earbuds in, moving at her usual fast but relaxed pace. She never made it to her favorite cafe on Park Street. At 8:10 a.m., the barista noticed her absence for the first time in nearly 3 years. By noon, her phone had gone straight to voicemail. By evening, the silence felt wrong. Lucy drove past Emily's house just after 6 p.m. and noticed Mark's car already in the driveway. The lights were on, the curtains were drawn. She texted Emily. "You okay? You disappeared today." No reply. Inside the house, Mark sat calmly at the kitchen table eating alone. When Lucy called the house phone, he answered on the second ring. "She went out earlier," he said evenly. "She probably stayed with a friend." "But she didn't tell anyone," Lucy replied. Mark paused for just a moment. "Emily likes her space sometimes." By the next morning, concern turned into panic. Emily missed work, something she had never done without calling in sick. Her supervisor tried her phone, then Mark. He repeated the same story. She had gone out for coffee. Maybe she'd needed a break. Maybe she'd traveled to clear her head. By Friday, her parents in Manchester were calling non-stop. Mark's tone never changed. He was calm. He was patient. He was steady. She left on her own, he told everyone. Emily needed time. But neighbors began to whisper. Milo was heard whining for hours behind the closed front door. The curtains stayed drawn. No one saw Emily's running shoes by the steps anymore. The flower pots she watered every morning began to dry out. On Sunday afternoon, Lucy showed up unannounced. The house felt wrong the moment she stepped inside. Too clean. Too quiet. Emily's favorite mug sat in the sink, unwashed. Her jacket still hung by the door. She wouldn't leave without Milo, Lucy said. Mark met her gaze without blinking. She took what she needed. Yet nothing Emily truly loved was gone. Not her sketchbook. Not her laptop. Not her passport. Only Emily was missing. By Monday, September 18, nearly a week after she vanished, Mark finally reported her as a missing person to Avon and Somerset police. He described her as stressed, confused, possibly unstable. He suggested she may have run away to start over. The story sounded clean, reasonable, believable. And for a moment, everyone accepted it. News outlets labeled it a voluntary disappearance. Posters went up across Bristol. Social media shared her smiling photos. Strangers searched parks and train stations. But behind closed doors, investigators were already uneasy. Because nothing about Emily's life suggested she wanted to vanish. And because disappearances like this rarely begin with choice. Everyone believed she had left on her own. But what if she hadn't? The case landed on Detective Sarah Thompson's desk early on the morning of September 19, 2023. Sarah was a seasoned investigator with Avon and Somerset police, known for her quiet instincts and refusal to accept easy answers. She had seen dozens of missing person cases over her 15-year career. Most fell into familiar patterns: runaways, custody disputes, mental health crises. At first glance, Emily Carter's disappearance looked like one of them. A grown woman. No signs of forced entry. A husband who claimed she walked out willingly. No immediate evidence of violence. Voluntary disappearance, the report read. But something about it nagged at Sarah. Emily had left behind her phone charger, her passport, her laptop, her dog, her entire life. People who choose to vanish usually take a way out. Emily had taken nothing. By midday, Sarah and her partner, Detective Tom Reynolds, stood outside the Carter home in Redland, knocking on the front door. Mark answered within seconds. His eyes were red. His shirt was neatly pressed. His voice calm and carefully restrained. "Come in," he said softly. "I just want my wife home." Inside, the house smelled strongly of cleaning products. Almost aggressively so. The living room was spotless. The kitchen gleamed. Every surface looked wiped, polished, erased. Too clean. Sarah noticed it immediately. They asked routine questions. When had he last seen Emily? What had they argued about recently? Had she ever talked about leaving? Mark stuck closely to his original story. She went out for coffee. She never came back. She was stressed. I think she needed space. His answers were smooth. Practiced. Almost rehearsed. But while Tom questioned Mark in the living room, Sarah's eyes drifted around the house. Emily's running shoes were still by the door. Her jacket hung on the hook. Her sketchbook sat open on the coffee table, half finished. Did Emily usually leave without her dog? Sarah asked casually. Mark hesitated for a heartbeat. She sometimes did, he said. It was the first crack. Later that evening, detectives canvassed the neighborhood. And that's when the small details began to surface. One neighbor mentioned seeing Mark outside late at night, several nights in a row, pacing near the back of the house. Another neighbor said they had heard heavy dragging sounds coming from the Carters' home around 2 a.m., just days after Emily vanished. She thought they were moving furniture, the officer reported. But it was strange, because Emily was already gone. The most unsettling tip came from a delivery driver. He recalled dropping off large flat-pack boxes, cement bags, and construction tools to Mark's address, after Emily had disappeared. Where were the boxes going? Sarah asked. Basement, the driver replied. He said he was doing renovations. The house, however, showed no signs of renovation. By the time Sarah returned to the station that night, her initial theory had shifted. Voluntary disappearance no longer fit as neatly as it had before. Still, without physical evidence, they had nothing solid. No crime scene. No blood. No struggle. No body. Just a man with a story. And a growing list of questions. Sarah pulled up Mark's background. Clean record. Stable job. No history of violence. No known enemies. No obvious financial motive. On paper, Mark Carter was exactly who he claimed to be, a devoted husband left behind. But Sarah had learned long ago. The quietest stories often hide the loudest lies. She ordered discreet surveillance on the house. For the next several nights, officers watched. They saw Mark come and go calmly. They saw him take rubbish out at odd hours. They saw him spend long stretches of time alone in the basement. Always late at night. Always when no one was watching. The first signs of deception were right under the detectives' noses. 3 days after the police visit, Mark Carter went public. It began with a short social media post on Emily's account. One he claimed she had asked him to write, just in case something ever happened. "Emily, wherever you are, please come home. We love you. I love you." Within hours, the post went viral across Bristol, then across the UK. Local news stations picked up the story. By the end of the week, Mark was sitting under studio lights on BBC West, his hands shaking, his voice cracking as he addressed the nation. "If you're watching this, please," he said through tears. "No one is angry. I just want to know you're safe. Milo waits by the door every night." The country watched in silence. Viewers wept with him. Strangers shared his plea. Thousands messaged him with prayers and support. To the public, Mark Carter was now the broken husband, a man destroyed by mystery and loss. But to the detectives, something about the performance felt calculated. Detective Sarah Thompson sat in her living room that night, watching the interview on mute. She replayed the same 30-second clip over and over again. Mark's words were emotional. His face showed pain. But his eyes stayed dry. At the station, officers noted how quickly Mark embraced the media. How willing he was to speak. How eager he seemed to control the narrative. He gave radio interviews. Newspaper statements. Live stream appeals. Each time, the story stayed almost identical. Emily was stressed. Emily needed space. Emily would come back. He spoke softly. Slowly. Always carefully choosing his words. Yet behind the scenes, cracks were beginning to form. Police surveillance showed that after every emotional TV appearance, Mark returned home, and went straight to the basement. Hours passed. Lights on. Lights off. No one else entered. No one else left. Neighbors began to whisper again. "He cries on TV," one woman said, "but I never hear him cry at night." Then, a former co-worker of Emily contacted police with something disturbing. "She told me once that she felt watched in her own house," the woman said. She joked about it, but it didn't sound like a joke. Another friend recalled an argument they had overheard weeks before Emily vanished. Mark shouting. Emily crying. A door slamming. The public still saw only one version of Mark. The devoted husband. The suffering widower, even though his wife had not yet been declared dead. But behind closed doors at the police station, a different picture was slowly being drawn. A man with two faces. One for the world. One for the truth. And the deeper investigators looked, the harder it became to separate the performance from the person. Do you think Mark is truly grieving, or hiding something much darker? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. By the end of the month, Mark Carter had become a familiar face across British television. A symbol of heartbreak. A symbol of hope. But for Detective Sarah Thompson, he was quickly becoming the center of the storm. The first hints didn't come from police. They came from the neighbors. About 2 weeks after Emily vanished, residents living closest to the Carter home began to notice something strange. A sharp, chemical-like smell drifting from the back of the house late at night. At first, they assumed it was paint. Or cleaning supplies. Or maybe mildew from old pipes. But the smell didn't go away. It came and went in waves, strongest after midnight. Then came the sounds. Low, heavy thuds. Scraping. Dragging. One neighbor described it as furniture being pulled across concrete. Another said it sounded more like digging. But no one reported it immediately. Mark had told everyone he was doing basement renovations to keep busy while waiting for Emily. Grief makes people uncomfortable. So they looked away. When police returned for a routine follow-up visit, Detective Thompson noticed something else. A new patch of flooring near the basement stairs. It was subtle. Just a slightly different shade of laminate from the rest of the room. Fresh. Too fresh. There was also faint brick dust in the air, so light most people wouldn't notice. But Sarah noticed. "Did you replace part of the floor?" she asked casually. Mark nodded without hesitation. "Old water damage," he replied. It was starting to rot. He smiled. Too quickly. Police had no warrant. No clear cause. And still, no proof Emily was dead. So they left. But the question stayed. Why renovate the basement weeks after your wife disappears? Behind the scenes, detectives followed another trail. CCTV footage. From hardware stores across Bristol. Over a 3-day period, just after Emily vanished, Mark was captured on camera purchasing bags of cement, plastic sheeting, bricks, heavy-duty gloves, industrial cleaner. On one receipt alone, he spent over £600. When questioned later, Mark said he was repairing a damp wall. Yet there had been no renovation permits. No visible construction above ground. Then came the phone records. On the night Emily disappeared, Mark's phone showed unusual movement, short bursts of activity during hours he claimed to be asleep. Data pings placed him repeatedly in and out of the basement area of the house. Still, none of it proved a crime. Not yet. Meanwhile, Emily's family grew desperate. Her mother arrived in Bristol from Manchester and stood outside the house, looking up at the windows where her daughter once waved. Mark refused to let her inside. "She wouldn't want you disturbing her privacy," he said. But whose privacy was he protecting now? As weeks passed, the case began to cool in the public eye. Posters faded. News cycles moved on. Tips slowed. Only the detective stayed awake at night, replaying every detail. Every lie. Every gap. Every sound in the dark. And still, no one imagined the truth was closer than anyone dared believe. Because the most important piece of the puzzle had already been purchased. Packed in a shopping bag. Priced on a receipt. Hidden in plain sight. Little did anyone know, the first puzzle piece had been bought weeks before. The breakthrough came by accident. It was 3 months after Emily disappeared when Detective Sarah Thompson received an unexpected call from a local electronics repair shop in Bedminster. "We recovered deleted data from a damaged security system," the technician said. "The address matches your missing person case." The system hadn't belonged to the Carters. It had belonged to their next-door neighbor, an elderly man who had recently passed away. His family had brought in his old hard drive to retrieve personal photos. What they found instead were weeks of motion-triggered recordings from the side and rear of the Carter home. And on those recordings, was Mark. Sarah and her team gathered in the darkened evidence room as the first clip played. The timestamp read: September 13, 2023, 2:14 a.m. On the screen, a shadow moved across the Carters' back garden. Then Mark stepped into view, wearing gloves, his face half hidden under a hood. He was dragging something large and heavy across the ground toward the basement entrance. The object was wrapped tightly in black plastic. No one spoke. Another clip loaded. 2:47 a.m. Mark reappeared, this time pushing a wheelbarrow filled with cement bags and bricks. His movements were slow, controlled. Purposeful. Then another. 4:08 a.m. He returned again. This time alone. His clothes were streaked with dark stains. He stopped, looked directly toward the neighbor's fence. And for a brief second, his eyes caught the camera. The room went silent. They watched the footage over and over again. Frame by frame. Drag. Lift. Push. Disappear into the basement. What no one could see on the video was what mattered most. What was inside the plastic? Sarah felt her stomach turn. Until that moment, the case had lived in the gray area between doubt and hope. A missing woman. A suspicious husband. No proof. Now there was proof of secret movement. Proof of concealment. Proof of intent. The footage didn't show a body. But it showed something far more terrifying. Preparation. The team immediately compared the timestamps with Mark's television appearances. On one of the same nights shown in the footage, he had appeared on a late-night news segment pleading for Emily's return. Tears on camera. Cement in the basement. 2 lives. 1 man. When Sarah placed the final image on the screen. A still frame of Mark wiping his hands on his trousers after returning from the basement, no one in the room doubted it anymore. Emily had not simply disappeared. She had been hidden. Deliberately. Carefully. Close. And that meant only one thing. This was no longer a search for a missing woman. It was now a potential murder investigation. As the screen went dark, the detectives realized this was no ordinary missing person case. To truly understand what was lost when Emily vanished, investigators had to rebuild her life piece by piece. And what they found only made her disappearance feel heavier. Emily Carter was more than a smiling face on a missing poster. She volunteered twice a week at a small animal rescue center in North Bristol, where she cleaned kennels, walked abandoned dogs, and paid vet bills for animals no one else wanted. Staff described her as the heartbeat of the place. She didn't just love animals, one volunteer said. She rescued everything she touched. At home, her world revolved around Milo and her 2 cats, Luna and Patch. She slept with Milo curled at her feet every night. She spoke to her pets like children. When she traveled, she left written instructions taped to the fridge with feeding times and tiny hearts drawn beside each name. Emily also painted landscapes, sunrises, quiet streets. One of her last unfinished paintings showed the Avon River at dawn, soft light over calm water. The same path she ran every morning. The same path she never returned from. Her friends described her as steady, loyal, and deeply rooted in routine. She didn't just vanish, Lucy told detectives through tears. She was building a future. Emily had recently been planning a charity art show. She had booked a small venue in Clifton Village and was saving her best pieces for display. The event was scheduled for October. She never made it to October. And the more police spoke to those who loved her, the clearer it became. Emily had no plans to leave. No reasons to run. No desire to disappear. But when detectives shifted their attention back to Mark, the layers darkened. At work, he was described as polite and quiet. The kind of man who never raised his voice. The kind who always stayed late. The kind who listened more than he spoke. At home, the picture was different. Friends recalled how Mark would suddenly appear at gatherings uninvited. How he would sit close to Emily and rest a hand on her knee, not gently, but possessively. How his eyes never left her when she spoke to other men. Lucy later remembered something she had brushed off for years. Once, during dinner, Emily's phone buzzed on the table. Before Emily could even reach for it, Mark flipped its screen down. "Dinner first," he said lightly. No one challenged it. Another friend recalled Emily canceling a trip to Brighton at the last minute. She said Mark had a bad feeling, the friend told police. That he didn't want her that far from home. Slowly, a pattern emerged. Mark didn't shout. He didn't threaten. He didn't hit. He redirected. He shaped Emily's world without her realizing the walls were closing in. Detective Thompson understood this kind of control well. It didn't announce itself with violence. It disguised itself as protection. As concern. As love. But control, when left unchecked, grows hungry. And hunger seeks power. In private messages recovered from Emily's old laptop, police found fragments of doubt she had never shared aloud. One message to an unsent draft read: "Sometimes I feel like I'm shrinking inside my own life." Another note, written weeks before she vanished: "I don't know how much of me is still mine." Those words hit harder than any evidence so far. Because they told a story Emily never had the chance to finish. Meanwhile, Mark's public mask remained flawless. He still attended prayer vigils. Still laid flowers beneath Emily's missing poster. Still spoke of her in past and future tense, as if she were both gone and coming back. But behind closed doors, his behavior grew colder. He began selling her belongings online. Giving away her art supplies. Repainting rooms in the house. Erasing signs of her, one piece at a time. To those watching closely, it no longer looked like grief. It looked like control, after death. The life everyone admired, may have been carefully controlled by a dark obsession. Once the hidden surveillance footage was secured, the investigation shifted into a new phase. No more assumptions. No more benefit of the doubt. Detective Sarah Thompson ordered a full forensic review of Mark Carter's digital and financial life. Every call. Every message. Every purchase. The deeper they dug, the darker the pattern became. Mark's phone records showed dozens of short calls made in the early hours of the morning during the week after Emily vanished, calls he had never mentioned. Some lasted only seconds. Others went unanswered. None made sense with his claim that he had been asleep and grieving. Then came the CCTV trail. Across Bristol, from Redland to Bedminster, Mark's movements were quietly traced through shop cameras and street footage. And what detectives saw told a chilling story of preparation. On September 14, just 2 days after Emily disappeared, Mark was filmed entering a hardware store near Gloucester Road. He left with heavy-duty black plastic sheeting, industrial-grade gloves, a large shovel. The next day, he visited another store across town and purchased 6 bags of ready-mix concrete, bricks, a wheelbarrow, a cement mixer attachment. Over the following week, he returned again and again. Small purchases each time. Sand, sealant, floor adhesive, cleaning chemicals strong enough to burn skin. Each receipt told part of the same story. Not repair. Not renovation. Concealment. When detectives confronted Mark with the evidence, his calm finally wavered. "I was doing work around the house," he said. "Keeping busy. I couldn't sit still." "Why the plastic sheeting?" Sarah asked. "For dust," he replied too quickly. "And the concrete?" "Old damp problem," he said again. But there were no damp reports. No contractor records. No building permits. Only large amounts of building material, bought by a man whose wife had vanished without a trace. As the questioning continued, Mark's version of events began to change, subtly at first. He adjusted times. He shifted locations. He misremembered small details. The coffee run moved from 7:30 a.m. to closer to 8. The last conversation with Emily changed from normal to slightly tense. The basement renovation changed from after she left to maybe before. Each adjustment was small. But together, they formed a dangerous pattern. A story that kept moving, because the truth couldn't stay still. Meanwhile, financial records revealed something equally disturbing. In the months leading up to Emily's disappearance, Mark had quietly increased his life insurance policy on her. The paperwork had been finalized just 6 weeks before she vanished. To Sarah, the timing felt like a ticking clock that had already reached zero. Friends who once defended Mark began to pull back. Silence replaced loyalty. Doubt replaced belief. Public opinion began to shift. And yet, still, there was no body. No confirmed crime scene. No undeniable proof Emily was dead. Only a growing mountain of suspicion, and a house that still refused to speak. If you're following these clues as closely as the detectives, hit subscribe right now. Because every small detail in this case will soon matter more than you can imagine. By the end of that week, Detective Thompson sat staring at a map of the Carter home pinned to her office wall. Her eyes lingered on one area. The basement stairs. The place Mark seemed to return to, again and again. The place no one had fully searched. Not yet. For a brief moment, it looked like the case was finally breaking open. A woman matching Emily's description was reported in Leeds. Another sighting came from Cardiff. A taxi driver in Reading swore he had driven her just days earlier. Each tip ignited hope. Each tip sent detectives racing across cities. And each time, it collapsed into nothing. The woman in Leeds had a tattoo that didn't match. The one in Cardiff spoke with a different accent. The taxi driver later admitted he wasn't sure anymore. False sightings began to flood in by the dozens. The public wanted Emily alive. So badly that they started to see her everywhere. For Mark, this wave of false hope became a shield. "She's out there," he told reporters. "I can feel it in my heart." He attended candlelight vigils with solemn eyes and trembling hands. He hugged Emily's mother as cameras flashed. He whispered, "We'll find her," into microphones. And many still believed him. But privately, his lies were growing sloppy. During one interview, Mark claimed he had not entered the basement at all since Emily disappeared. 2 days later, his phone data showed repeated motion-triggered activations in that exact area. When questioned, he changed his story. I go down there sometimes to think." Another time, he said the new flooring patch was installed before Emily vanished. CCTV proved it was installed after. Each lie was small. But small lies, stacked together, become a wall. And walls exist to hide something. Still, without a body or a clear crime scene, the case once again drifted into dangerous uncertainty. Detective Thompson felt the pressure closing in. Public confidence wavered. Resources grew strained. Superiors whispered about scaling back. Behind the scenes, doubts began to surface even among the officers. "What if she really did leave?" one asked quietly. "What if we're forcing this?" Sarah didn't answer. Because she felt something worse than doubt. She felt being misled. Not just by Mark. But by the case itself. It was as if the truth was deliberately stepping just out of reach, close enough to glimpse, too far to seize. Emily's mother returned to Manchester broken by exhaustion and unanswered prayers. Posters on walls peeled away. Social media moved on to fresher tragedies. Life, cruel and indifferent, kept going. And Mark stayed right where he was. In the house. In the spotlight. In control of the story. For a moment, even Sarah wondered if she had been wrong. If perhaps they were all chasing ghosts. But then, something small happened. Something most people would have overlooked. And it changed everything. Just when the detectives thought they were close, the trail twisted again. Detective Sarah Thompson had grown familiar with the Carter house in every detail: the worn floorboards, the faint scratches along the kitchen door, the smell of damp paint in the basement. Yet, something about the basement stairs always nagged at her instincts. It wasn't visible to the casual observer. Not even to a friend or neighbor. But to a trained investigator, the anomalies stood out. The first clue came from structural photographs taken months earlier. Small differences in the color of the concrete near the base of the stairs. Fresh patches, uneven textures, subtle shifts that suggested recent tampering. Nothing overt. But enough for the forensic team to raise a flag. Next came the ground-penetrating radar scan. It was the kind of technology used in archaeological digs, cemetery investigations, and disaster recovery. The radar detected a dense, oddly shaped object beneath the floor, one that didn't match the foundation or plumbing of the house. "It's been there for months," one technician whispered, eyes fixed on the monitor. "Someone tried to hide it, but they didn't think we'd look this closely." The detectives felt the tension in the room rise. Weeks of frustration, false leads, and dead-end tips had brought them here. And yet, the feeling of dread only intensified. It was the kind of suspense that gripped the stomach, the kind that whispered, "What if the truth is worse than anything you've imagined?" Sarah's mind raced back to the surveillance footage, the cement, the plastic sheeting, the gloved hands dragging heavy objects at night. Everything now pointed to a single, horrifying possibility. The basement stairs, ordinary to the world outside, had become the epicenter of deceit. Officers carefully examined the flooring and the walls around the stairs. Dust collected at unusual angles. A faint smell, metallic and chemical, lingered near the edges. Every measurement suggested someone had built a concealment, a small compartment, perhaps even a grave, right under their noses. For months, the world had been following Mark's story: the grieving husband, the tearful TV appearances, the narrative of hope and loss. But for the detectives, the narrative had crumbled piece by piece. The only question that remained: what was he hiding? Then came the final micro-clue, the one that made the team stop breathing. A small brick fragment, out of place among the foundation wall, perfectly sized to be removed by hand. No one had noticed it in the initial surveys. No one had checked the area closely enough to see what it concealed. Sarah knelt, fingers brushing the edge. Her heart raced. Every instinct screamed at her that this was it. The final piece. What lay beneath those stairs had been hidden in plain sight for months. The jackhammers had just begun their work when a dull hollow sound echoed from beneath the basement stairs. Detective Sarah Thompson and her team exchanged glances. This was it, the moment that months of careful investigation had been building toward. Piece by piece, the concrete was chipped away. The dust hung heavy in the air. Then, beneath layers of stone, plaster, and careful concealment, a black plastic sheet appeared. And under it, something unmistakable. Emily. Her body was found in a deliberate, painstakingly hidden position, wrapped in plastic with her arms folded. A dress she had loved still clung lightly to her frame. In one hand, investigators found faded tulips, apparently placed there with eerie care. And in the pocket of her robe, a small ring, a final, twisted symbol of love and control. Sarah could barely breathe. This is meticulous," said one of the forensic officers. Someone wanted it hidden. But also, someone wanted it remembered. Every detail spoke volumes. Mark's planning was flawless in its concealment. New concrete. A red brick wall. Fresh plaster to cover the edges. The black plastic to keep her hidden from sight. Yet, in the same act, he had left subtle symbols of emotional attachment: flowers for Mother's Day, the ring for recognition. Love and cruelty, twisted together. The media had told the world a story of hope and devotion. Friends and neighbors had believed a man who cried on camera. But the evidence told a different story, a life taken and concealed by the one closest to her. Emily's mother sobbed when she was allowed to see the recovered personal items. Volunteers from the Animal Rescue Center left small flowers at the doorstep. The city of Bristol mourned, realizing how easily appearances can deceive. For Detective Thompson, this revelation was both satisfying and horrifying. Months of red herrings, false leads, and careful observation had led here. And yet, the emotional weight of Emily's final moments, and the perverse care in which they were hidden, stayed with her long after the day ended. Mark Carter, once the grieving husband in a public eye, had been revealed as the architect of a secret too dark for many to comprehend. If this revelation shocked you, comment below. What could drive someone to hide the truth for so long? With Emily's remains finally recovered, the investigation moved into a full-scale unraveling of Mark Carter's years of deception. What had once seemed like small inconsistencies now became a web of lies and manipulation, carefully constructed to hide a terrifying truth. Detective Sarah Thompson led the team through a meticulous review of phone records. Each call, text, and GPS ping was analyzed. Late-night movements, short trips to hardware stores, and repeated location pings around the basement were all linked. Small purchases of black plastic, cement, and cleaning chemicals, once dismissed as home improvement, now took on a sinister weight. Next came the quicklime searches. The team cross-referenced Mark's internet history with the hardware purchases and discovered he had researched chemical reactions, decomposition, and odor suppression. The intent was clear: to erase evidence, to delay discovery. Neighbor testimonies painted a fuller picture. The late-night noises. The shifting shadows in the basement. The sudden absence of Emily's laughter and warmth. Small but persistent details that everyone had ignored, until now. Friends and family shared messages Emily had written but never sent, expressing a sense of being controlled, isolated, and fearful of leaving Mark. The investigators began to understand how psychological manipulation had allowed him to maintain appearances for years: the doting husband on TV, the perfect neighbor, the grieving man at vigils. Piece by piece, the team reconstructed Mark's deception over months and years. Every lie about where he was, what he was doing, and what Emily was up to formed a carefully choreographed story designed to mislead everyone, from the media to the police to the people closest to Emily. What became chillingly clear was that every tear Mark shed on camera, every public plea, every photo of him holding flowers or wearing a somber expression was no longer just a performance of grief. It was a mask for guilt. A mask that allowed him to operate undetected for years, controlling perceptions while hiding the darkest truth under his own roof. Detectives reviewed the CCTV footage once more. Each clip of him moving objects at night now screamed guilt. Every financial record, every media appearance, every carefully constructed narrative added to the evidence of premeditation and manipulation. Mark had been hiding in plain sight all along. Even after the arrest, the weight of the investigation lingered. Friends and family struggled to reconcile the man they thought they knew with the actions he had taken. Emily's story, silenced for so long, finally emerged through the painstaking work of the detectives, exposing the terrifying reality of a life controlled, manipulated, and ultimately stolen. Every tear he shed on camera now tells a different story. As Mark Carter sat in the interrogation room, the public image of the grieving husband crumbled into fragments. Behind the composed exterior, the investigations revealed a man of chilling duality. Charming and polite in public, manipulative and calculating in private. Forensic psychologists brought in by the prosecution described him as methodical, obsessed with control, and skilled at presenting a persona that masked sinister intentions. He didn't strike out of passion, one expert explained. Every action was planned, every word rehearsed. He weaponized charm and grief to manipulate those around him. Meanwhile, the community reeled. Friends who had once defended him on social media struggled to accept the truth. Emily's colleagues at the animal rescue and her art circle were shaken to their cores. Volunteers whispered in disbelief, he smiled beside her in every photo, and yet. Local news outlets in Bristol, Bath, and Cardiff covered the case extensively. Candlelight vigils were replaced with media scrutiny. People debated on social platforms, with hashtags like #JusticeForEmily trending across the UK. Each revelation. Mark's meticulous planning, the quicklime searches, the black plastic concealment, added fuel to a growing fire of outrage. Emily's mother spoke publicly for the first time since the discovery, her voice trembling but resolute. She was loved, more than anyone could understand. And now, the world knows what he took from us. Yet even as the outrage spread, Mark remained a study in composure. He appeared on court-mandated media segments, maintaining a calm, measured tone, seemingly detached from the storm his actions had ignited. His ability to perform convincingly, even now, unnerved investigators. Detective Sarah Thompson reflected on the psychological profile. She realized that understanding him was key to anticipating his next moves. Every lie, every public display, every small act of control pointed to a man who had calculated for years how to appear innocent while hiding the unthinkable. And yet, despite overwhelming evidence, the legal process had just begun. Justice may be near, but the story isn't over yet. The courtroom was silent, every eye fixed on Mark Carter. Years of deception, lies, and manipulation had led to this moment, the moment when the full truth could no longer be hidden. Detective Sarah Thompson recounted the painstaking investigation, late-night hardware store trips, black plastic purchases, ground-penetrating radar findings, the hidden grave beneath the basement stairs, and the carefully orchestrated public performances that had fooled friends, family, and an entire city. Each detail from the past 14 chapters, the smiles, the media appearances, the false sightings, was laid bare in court. For Emily's family, each revelation was a mixture of heartbreak and relief. The months and years of uncertainty had ended. Volunteers from the animal rescue, friends, and neighbors wept openly. The city of Bristol collectively exhaled, finally understanding the horrifying reality behind the perfect facade of a devoted husband. Psychologists described Mark's duality in the courtroom, the charming, manipulative man who had weaponized appearances to hide his darkest instincts. Every subtle control he exerted over Emily's life, from social restrictions to emotional manipulation, was now exposed as part of a chilling plan. And then came the final, undeniable proof, Emily's remains, meticulously positioned, the flowers, the ring, the black plastic, and the concrete concealment. Each detail spoke of a life stolen and carefully hidden, a life loved, yet trapped under the stairs, in plain sight. For the public watching from around the world, the story tied together every suspenseful moment from the beginning, the morning runs along the Avon, the subtle unease, the disappearance, the false leads, the media manipulation, the basement anomalies, and the final revelation. Every piece fit together, leaving no room for doubt. The emotional closure was profound. Emily's story, silenced for too long, had finally emerged in full. Her memory was honored, her character celebrated, and her life remembered as one of warmth, love, and resilience, even against the darkness she had unknowingly lived alongside. Yet, for those following the investigation, the lessons lingered. Appearances can deceive, control can hide behind charm, and the truth, no matter how long it takes, always has a way of emerging. And after years of deception, the truth was finally revealed. Emily had been right there. Hidden in plain sight beneath the stairs. Her husband's dark secret was finally exposed. If you were shocked by this story, hit subscribe, ring the notification bell, and comment below. What would you do if someone you trusted hid a secret this dark?